Hello, I'm Mary Dombrowski, and this is War and Magic Episode 8. This is the second of our two conversations with researcher and veteran Bill Kubick. In this episode, Bill speaks of friends of his who are also book authors, so I'd like to take just a moment to introduce to you the books about which Bill speaks. The first is Lillian Baker's book, first published in 1990. This wonderful volume, American and Japanese Relocation in World War II, Fact, Fiction, and Fallacy, is widely available on the Internet. Another book, which is available on the Internet, is David D. Lowman's Magic. This seminal volume was first published in 2000 and edited by Lee Allen. The third book is one of which I'm particularly fond. Keith Robar appeared as an earlier guest on War and Magic. His book, Intelligence, Internment, and Relocation, is available through Kaikar Publications, whose web address appears at the bottom of this screen. This next book, My Life as a Jarhead, by Ralph Walker Willis, is unfortunately out of print, but it may be available to you if you do a search. This manuscript, The Japanese Evacuation, 1942, It Had to Be So, is written by Shonin Yamashita. Mr. Yamashita was relocated to Poston's Relocation Center and speaks vividly of his experiences there. This is a privately published manuscript, but I would be most happy to make available a copy to anyone who asks. And lastly, I'd like to show you a book which builds upon this earlier research. Michelle Malkin's In Defense of Internment was published in the year 2004. Welcome to War and Magic. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Bill Kubick.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Goad, and this is the second installment of our interview with Bill Kubick. He has done a lot of research into pre-World War II subversion on the West Coast. Thank you for being with us again, Bill.
All right. Thank you for inviting me.
Could you tell us a little bit about the research that you have done on this issue of the subversive activity on the West Coast of America?
Well, I would say that I knew that such subversion existed for a long time. But my research was to get proof of it, written proof of it, when it happened and who participated and so forth. And so I visited, I made about 6 trips to Washington, D.C. I have a daughter that lives in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I used to go by and stay a few days with her and her family and then go on to Washington. It's fairly close. And I made trips to the National Archives and spent a couple of days there each time. It's a voluminous place that takes up nothing but time. And then I went to the FBI headquarters and on Pennsylvania Avenue, which is like a redoubt you could hole up there and nothing would ever. They got that whole thing surrounded by, the doors open up and a car can come in and the door is closed. But I tell you, Hoover was really setting it up for survival there. And I managed to get into the interior file room. You have to be escorted by some factor of the house. Usually an attorney will go in with you into this file room, and they stay there all the time that you're there. If you're there 2 hours, they stay 2 hours. If you go to the John, they go with you. Nobody goes in there alone. And I turned around, files all around me, Rosenberg, Frank Sinatra, everybody, all the controversial figures. And it's a weird place, I'll tell you. The stuff that I'd like to open one of them up, but you can't touch anything.
And these are the FBI archives?
That's FBI archives.
Yes. Okay.
And you have to call in the day ahead of time before you appear. And they get the files. They have these rolling files they bring in, and you got to go through it, which isn't easy. And to get on your subjects is not difficult. It's not easy. And then you start in reviewing the files and pulling them out, and to get on where you want. And if you find anything you like, you got to write down the number of it. Say, okay. And that's the job. So I was in there maybe roughly a couple hours each time. And you can imagine a container this long on wheels. They have all those files in there. It just bugs you, you know.
Yes.
Well, and I was so excited I wanted to get some, you know. Well, we made about at least 5 or 6 trips there. And they got to know me. And I felt... I got files on cases, FBI cases in Los Angeles County, which were very good. I got them for San Francisco area, which were very good. But I could not get Seattle, Puget Sound area. There was something they were protecting. I still think that something was hot, that somebody didn't want something revealed. And they prevailed on them to keep Seattle, Puget Sound secure. It wasn't going to get out. So I, in fact, was so entranced with the idea of what was in the Seattle, Puget Sound file that I pursued it further. And I called the head of the information, I can't think of his name. We talked for 2 hours, I think, and the idea was I couldn't see any reason why they were sitting on Seattle, Puget Sound. Why? And he says, well, he couldn't give me a why, really. No. We talked 2 hours. And the bottom line was, he told me that as long as any person was still alive that was in those files, they could not release it. Mm-hmm. And I said, what the hell, that could go on for 100 years. Yeah. And you're covering something. And he wouldn't admit it, but it was a cover. That something was in there. We heard, it was strictly a rumor, that a couple of Caucasians in Seattle were cooperating with the Japanese. And in fact, one legal company that still exists. Maybe this is why they don't want to spring it. The old man was working with the Japanese. Well, this encouraged me more to get it out, see, and I haven't succeeded.
You went to the FBI archives 6 times, and once you go through the files and collect the information, are you allowed to copy the information and take it back home?
You can't take anything out.
Oh.
No, what they do is they'll give you free 100 copies each time you come. They will print it and mail it to you. You won't get it immediately. You might wait 6 months to get it. And it's a slow process. Boy, I tell you, they could discourage anybody quick that's in a hurry. Well, I would come up with roughly 100 pieces that I was interested in, and they would mail them to me, but free. But they're secure. Any names are blocked out. There's no personal names. They'll give what happened in the altercation or whatever. Say they picked up somebody for having a searchlight, or might have a whole bunch of Japanese money or something, or any kind of thing suspicious. The FBI will pick them up, but they won't identify who they are. Okay, so after you get to what happened, you're still not much further because you can't identify who it was. Okay, they protect it, I tell you. And my point was, all this information I was reading in FBI files was stuff that you weren't reading in the newspapers. And down the street at the White House or the Capitol, this legislation was being discussed and never mentioned this stuff I was reading.
I'm sorry, what legislation would they?
The passing that 103, that Japanese money bill.
Can you tell us more about the story behind the 1988 Civil Rights Act that you made an allusion to? President Reagan signed this act that gave the Japanese the monetary compensation of $20,000.
Plus the deal that we're beefing about that's happening on Mercer Island, that they were given X number of $1 million in addition to the $20,000 each. The thing that bothered us was that they were given this big, gosh, I don't have the exact amount, but it's in the millions or billions. They were given this money to rewrite the history books and everything in the schools. And California has done it already.
Was that the specific purpose, to rewrite history?
Sure it was. Well, to teach, the words were to teach the Americans what happened. Imagine that. Teach the Americans what happened, and we know that didn't happen.
Yes, because
it did happen on their side.
Because the information that you retrieved from the FBI archives showed a different side of history from what's being written about in the history books.
Definitely, there's no comparison. Our point was that we didn't totally disagree that the Japanese should have the right to tell their side of it, but we wanted our side of it too.
I see.
That's what burns us up. There's a totally different side of it, you know. That's what we're trying to expose.
Mm-hmm. Bill, we've heard the term concentration camp used in relation to in the relocation camps. Can you tell us the difference?
Oh, definitely. I'll start with Army camps. Army camps, I probably was 10 different ones or more, and they're usually set up in the boondocks somewhere where they don't interfere with commerce, you know, and to insulate them with what's going on, they put up fences around them, see, barbed wire fences, and they have gates where you got to go through to get in and out. Okay, it's not a concentration camp. That's a military camp. That's what we had all over. Well, when the Japanese came along and they picked them up, they had to put them in something where they wouldn't get out, or people couldn't come in. That was the problem. We had hotshot people who had lost somebody in the war, and they would shoot them up, you know, if they were wandering around the streets.
So the Americans might shoot the Japanese?
Or sure, our American people that have guns.
I see.
So they might have lost somebody at Pearl Harbor. The feeling against the Japanese was like you were a leper when Pearl Harbor happened. They lost their jobs. Insurance business quit. People wouldn't buy. They wouldn't go into a theater. They wouldn't go to a restaurant. The Chinese had signs out. This is Chinese, not Japanese. I saw this.
In the Los Angeles area?
Los Angeles area. Because there's a lot of Japanese restaurants, a lot of Chinese restaurants. And people wouldn't go to any of them. So the Chinese put signs up. This is not Japanese. To get people to go. And DeWitt's action was on the military side more. The dangers that were happening to the military because of it, but really the community dangers were even more, because what are they going to do? And if the Japs were to land on the shore, which was a possibility at that time, what do you think they would do? They wouldn't trust them, the ones they found on shore, the Japanese Americans on shore. They'd shoot them out. Except the ones that were going to cooperate if they could get through. We think there were a lot of cooperation going on. In fact, the Japanese were sending money home to the war effort in Japan. Their support of the emperor in the millions of dollars through the Specie Bank in San Francisco. And that's all in the record. And they shut it off finally after our government finally stopped the practice because they were just sending money home. What are they sending money home? To support the emperor against us. That's what they were doing. And as far as the concentration camps, where we get back to the subject, they weren't really concentration camps. All they were fenced-in areas, large areas, with sometimes barbed wire, sometimes not, just to protect the area. Because if we had, say, 5,000 men at a army camp, we had a wire fence around with barbed wire on it, and a gate you had to go through the MPs. To get out, you had to check in. To come back in, you had to check in.
Yeah.
That's the only way they could do it. Otherwise, it'd be run all over the place. And people would be invading it, and women would be coming and going. Oh, you couldn't have it, you know. So they did the same thing with the Japanese, and treated them just as well as the GIs. In fact, I visited a couple of camps, and I think they were better than our army camps were.
Oh.
Yeah, as far as facilities go. They built, they talk about tar paper shacks. Well, that's what we had too. It was a quick deal. You could build a building with a foundation or whatever, you had to put it up quick. And people don't realize that the time element and all this stuff, you know. If we had a problem, we had to deal with it, and I think DeWitt did correctly. That's my idea. And it wasn't a concentration camp. Among the elite, the group of both sides, there's kind of an agreement among us not to call them concentration camps. But there's a few screwballs who go out of the deal and call it that. And they're irresponsible. Because the truth is there's no connection.
Well, thank you for making that much more clear. Well, you mentioned Lillian Baker. Could you tell us a little bit about her?
Well, she's the one that, bless her soul, she's now not living, but she started earlier than we did in this deal, really. I did maybe a year before I did.
So can I just stop you? When you say we, it's the group of people who have been continually doing research about...
We're the opposition. They say. We're the halfway organized opposition. And she started to put out a bulletin kind of to people that became interested in it. She wrote, appeared on radio programs and TV programs or whatever, and she got noticed to herself and got started, and it spread up. I heard stuff from Howard Garver and Ralph Willis and all those. We all got involved with her. We looked at her as kind of a patriarch, kind of, that was very meticulous, kept files. She had a room full like this of files on this subject.
Where did she live?
Gardena, California. It's probably maybe 20 miles out of the town, something like that. Out of L.A.
L.A.
And they had a newspaper there that printed every darn thing she wrote.
Oh.
They were patriotic, I tell you. They were the Gardena News, I think it was. But they were the most fair paper. But of course, they were insignificant in the big picture, see. And she started getting a lot of stuff published. And in fact, Stanford University, the Hoover Institute, has her complete files.
Oh, which are open to the public?
Yes. I understood that they shut it off. They felt when they had her stuff, they had everything, see. See, they couldn't handle any more. So I wrote a letter to the director and said that I was an associate of hers and worked with her and for 2 or 3 years and quite closely. And I've got a bunch of stuff that I would like, not too much. In fact, I had three journals about that big, and the gal told me, real nice gal, a doctor, Danielson, I think, the doctor was in charge of it. And I said, I think I got a little different version than she has. And I says, it's noticeable, the two. We go to lunch together and everything, and we agree, but there's certain ramifications that I go to a little different right route than she does.
I see.
So I said, would you be interested? She says, listen. She said, you send me. Can you put something small together? I said, oh yeah. And I mailed it to her, and she called me back and said that she would take this 3-volume deal that I had. And so as of 2 years ago, I'm in there with her stuff.
Bill, you're holding the medal honoring you from the Freedom Foundation. Can you tell us what that means to you and what it...
Well, I was quite prolific at writing letters to the editor. I always have been. I must have written thousands of them. Well, I wrote one, kind of an obscure one, that I'd forgotten about, and it was about my grandparents coming into Ellis Island, and this two had met on board ship, and they were married when they got into New York.
Bill, you mentioned earlier testifying before the CWRIC Commission in the mid-'80s. Can you tell us about your testimony?
Well, I came on kind of cold. I didn't know the people who were going to interview us. There was a bunch of people that were, in my book, over the hill. Bureaucrats.
Who were part of the commission?
Were
the commission.
Yeah, we're the commission. And we were put, the hearing started at about 10 in the morning. All the media was there earlier before lunchtime. They left. We were on at 4 o'clock, just before it quit.
And no media. The testimony previously in the morning had been from the Japanese?
Oh, yes. Solid. And a few Caucasian sympathizers. We've got those too. Well, we didn't hear the morning testimony. We were waiting around all day till 4 o'clock, and finally we appeared. The three of us, General Beeman and Major Hill, and I was the only non-commissioned one. And I brought up the rear. But we were. It was a heavily Japanese-American audience, and they were laughing. They were deriding everybody. They were, I like to grab the hold of a couple of them. And they were making a fun deal out of the whole thing. And the commission went along with it. Never reprimanded them. Instead of pounding the gavel and said, we're not going to continue with this. That's what burned us up, all three of us. And we went out of there. We hadn't met before. I never saw those two people before. We shook hands and we made an agreement that we weren't going to quit. This made us all the worse. The treatment we got there was terrible.
Yes. So basically, when you did your testimony, you were trying to get the information out about the relocation, the reasons behind it, the subversion that was actually happening.
We wanted to tell our story. It hadn't been covered in the paper at all. I didn't feel it ever was covered in the paper.
So the finding of the radios and the other articles that were confiscated with the Contraband Act in the 40s, that whole information was never really brought out?
Oh, very slim. It was downplayed. See, this whole commission was oriented to Japanese. It was made up of a minority. This Bernstein, she interviewed Japanese and Americans and tried to tell them how to coach them on how to testify before her own hearing. We have evidence of that.
So this is one of the people on the commission who set up.
It was set up just to get to their point. They tried other points. They tried other ways. They tried to go through Congress, and they failed. They were trying to get a monetary reward, say.
These are the Japanese?
Yes. They didn't need it, really, most of them. But it was a question. They got to eat. I still don't figure out what makes them tick to this day.
With the
why they wanted all this.
Yeah. With the 40s, with this Contraband Act, what type of articles were taken from the Japanese Americans?
Like around March Field in California was one of the major Air Force bases in the war. I think it's called something else now. They changed the name. But it's a major one. It's in Santa Ana, California. And they discovered one Japanese American that had maps of the airfield, planes, the pictures of the planes, everything, how many were there, everything. He had searchlights, he had all kinds of recording, radio equipment and everything. He gives his name and his address. This is something that slipped out.
Yeah.
It wasn't supposed to go out. Oh, geez, I did have to have a reward for all this fooling around. instead of that junk, all crossed out.
I know that there are different definitions of espionage depending on whether or not information which is gathered openly and transmitted to the enemy is considered to be espionage. Is that the same as information gathered secretly? So how does one define espionage?
Well, I'd say that if one country is planning to invade another country and they send emissaries over with the express purpose of taking pictures or knowledge of the defense of the other country, that becomes, whatever it is in what form, that becomes espionage. It has to be legitimate things that we're trying to protect for our safety, our country, and that's the best way you can describe it. If it's insignificant, if somebody's taken a picture and just read a scrapbook, that's different. We encourage that.
Bill, some Japanese Americans felt, as you do, that the personal justice denied, which was the report put out by the CWRIC Commission, was flawed and biased. Did you know, for example, Mr. Yamashita?
He's the one that wrote, "It had to be so."
Which?
Yamashita.
Oh, Yamashita?
Yeah, and he was, I never met him personally. I talked to him on the phone a couple of times. We were staying, my wife and I, down in Oceanside. We used to stay down there in the wintertime. And I got a phone call from this guy, and he mentioned Lillian, that she gave him my name, and maybe you'd like to talk to him. So, I wanted to talk to him. And so I made an appointment to meet him on the corner by the beach, a certain spot, a certain hour. He never showed up. He never showed up. I don't think I got scared about it, or you see, he was under tremendous pressure by the Japanese. His wife was ill, and they wouldn't take her in the Japanese home.
Oh.
Oh boy, I tell you, when they get, they disowned him, because he said I got a piece here about him, and he's probably dead now, but he was. The title of his piece was quite a maybe 30 pages or something or more, and the title of it was "It Had to Be So," and his idea was that the best thing in the world that could happen to his people was a place where they could live safely and get fed and whatever. A lot of them thought it was wonderful. The trouble is, we couldn't get more like that. They shunned them. They wouldn't allow them in their rest homes or anything. Anybody that spoke out like that, they were disciplined.
So there definitely are some Japanese Americans who are have a positive view towards the relocation.
Oh, definitely. Lillian had a couple of contributors that were Japanese, but she was pledged not to reveal who they were.
I see.
One of them was a printer that did a lot of her printing.
Oh.
So there's a silent, I'd say almost a majority that cooperated with the United States. But maybe say 30%, 25% were on the mixed side. See, they had dual citizenship, a lot of them. The other ones insisted on, when a child was born, it had to be a Japanese citizen, plus American citizen. We call them dual citizens. Well, they were the ones that were troublesome a lot of times, because they had close ties to the fatherland.
Now, you, during the CWRIC Commission hearings and all, there was a man, David Lowman, who was part of that.
Yes.
Did you know Mr. Lowman?
Yes, definitely. I first met him. There was a hearing at I don't know the date of it, at the Sawtell military installation in California, Southern California, and Senator Stevens of Alaska had a hearing there on this. He did have hearings around different places, and he brought a group down, and they were all pro deal, the whole shebang, the people conducting the whole thing. And, oh, I tell you, that Senator Stevens, he's still around, a prominent senator, and that son of a gun. Do you know what had happened? I was sitting out in the audience in about second row, and they were running the whole program. They set up the whole props, this crew of Senator Stevens. It's supposed to be an open hearing, you know, on this question. And these people were running the thing, and a guy put a tripod up like that and was taking pictures of us in the audience.
Oh.
Boy, I didn't like that.
So this was a hearing again about the relocation issue.
Yeah, the whole issue. Yeah, he was going to. Well, see, Alaska. There's a connection up there because Attu and all that. They were cut into the deal up there as part of the reparations. Aleuts,
yeah,
whatever. They're a mixture. I never met one of them, but they got in on the deal, and they were claiming reparations also. They wanted it, so they were in on it. And his group, he was representing those people, kind of, I guess, Senator Stevens. But boy, I resented somebody taking a picture of me from the stage, you know.
Yeah, you don't know what this is going to be used for.
You're darn right you don't. I don't want to. And do you know, when I left that hearing that day, I'm going back to it, that hearing that I attended here in Seattle, when I testified, my wife said to me that a car stopped out in front of my house during the program when I was down there. It took pictures of the house.
Well, so you were saying you were acquainted with David Lowman.
Oh, yes.
And
I met him at this hearing at Sawtell, California, Veterans Hospital. They have a big multi-acre place with cemetery and everything. And they have a big hall there. And that's where they conducted the hearing. And I'd heard of Lowman, see, but I met him. He testified. I didn't. I wasn't involved in it. I was just a visitor, observer. And he testified, and as he left, I tapped him on the shoulder and said, Lillian knew him quite well. I tapped him on the shoulder, and I introduced myself, and I said, I'd like to see you here. Where are you staying? If you'd like, I'd like to meet you. So I met him at a hotel there, and that's the first time I met him. And boy, we talked for hours, you know. And he really didn't know much about a lot of it. And we kind of sold him on the idea
about
helping us, you know, and really going into it.
And getting more information about.
And yes, and he was in security. He'd been in pretty high up in the government and the security agency, and he was into the cables, into the magic cables, quite heavily. He knew that intimately, more than I did, and nobody knew more. So we got talking to him, and we started contacting each other, and then thereafter we met quite a few times. And he told me he had this book involved. There was he was switching to our side, really, more than he was. He was kind of neutral at the time, a little bit. He was kind of, you know, officials kind of want to cover both sides and leave ways to get it back, you know. And they don't come out wholly for one side right away until they investigate a little bit. And we got him, between Lillian Baker and a couple of us, we got him going on it. And he got real hot, and he wrote this book.
So what?
And he took me, pardon me, he took me, he said, I want to do something one day. We meet for lunch. So I met him, and he's got this book, and a loose leaf form, big one of those big loose leaves. And he had the whole shebang together. And he wanted to publish it, see. And he wanted me to help him publish it. And I wanted to read it over a little bit, you know. I didn't know where it was coming from totally. And boy, I agreed with him. I called him up and I said, whatever I can do to help. Well, he says, I'm trying through the Navy. He was an officer in the Navy, commander, I think. And I'm trying to get the book published. And he says they're treating it like a hot potato. The hierarchs in the Navy after the war. See, this is after the war. And I said, well, just hold on a little bit, and maybe something will develop. You know, we're meeting the same kind of opposition. You know, a lot of people feel guilt about the war, even in Japan. You know, the Japanese were miraculously able to get the sympathy of Americans. I don't know how they did it, but they did. And pictures like that woman with the children at Winslow, boy, that did more than, you can't, you know, people are emotional, and they see a woman with children being abused or being in custody. That's terrible, you know. Mm-hmm. So, but when I met with him, he presented me at this lunchtime. I had a friend, a publisher down in Southern California, and I said, I'll take it to him. See?
Yes.
And well, he says, I've tried the Navy, I've tried everything, but I can't get off the ground. Nobody seems, they don't want to talk about magic or anything, you know, because it wasn't in the books and all this, or it wasn't in the papers and all that. He was highly disappointed. Mm-hmm. And I said, let me try this friend I have from the Hollywood area, the publisher, and I'll see what I can do. Well, I took it to the fellow, and he looked it over, and he says, oh, it's got publicity, it's got possibilities, but you need an index, you need all that in a book, you know, you got to have reference, you got to have reference pages. It was a big object to do it, you know, mm-hmm. and people will do that for a price, you know, but well, Dave got disgusted with the whole thing, you know, and I didn't get too good a response from this fellow. It would be a long process to do, and so I still have the book and the original. And then he went on. This fellow from Utah, Alan, you've heard of him.
What is his name?
Alan, his last name. I can't think of his first name. A veteran, officer, veteran, retired, decided to pick up this idea, and he heard about this book of Lowman, see. Mm-hmm. So he called his wife and him, well, he was still alive, Lowman, and got permission to do it, see.
To publish it?
Yeah, to publish it. And this guy had some money and was interested, and he did a good job. He published this whole shebang without his name on it, hardly.
Huh.
It's all Lowman, just like he's alive.
Mm-hmm.
And Lowman's dead, see.
I see.
He would have loved to see it in the book.
There has been a cute phrase attached to you about your patriotism. What is that? How patriotic you are.
Well, I was supposed to speak somewhere. I can't remember where it was. But a friend of mine was introducing me, and before he gave me the name, he says, well, this fellow is patriotic down to his toenails. I'll never forget that. And I would say yes. I'm not loyal to any political party because they fuss and I'm hot and cold, but about their arguments. In fact, I'd like to start up a real third party, but I'm too old. But if I was younger, I'd like to do that. But there's a lot of people that don't agree with either party. And you kind of throw something up there and pick out which side is going to land or something. Mm-hmm. That's how you vote, a lot of people. Yeah. I think this election surprised a lot of people. Higher-ups is surprised.
Well, we thank you for your patriotism, Bill, because we need it in today's society, and we always have.
How about one more, which I really